When my little grandson begged me not to wear my favorite red coat, I thought it was just a child's silly game. I had no idea it was a warning that would pull me into a decades-old secret and a danger I never saw coming. The morning sun was doing its best to fight off the autumn chill, painting my little kitchen in a warm, buttery light. I was just about to take my first glorious sip of Earl Grey when my daughter Sarah and my 7-year-old grandson Leo burst through the door. Sarah was a whirlwind of briefcase and anxiety, her brow already furrowed with the day's worries. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," she said, planting a hurried kiss on my cheek. "I've got that big presentation today and the sitter canceled. Leo, be good for Grandma. I'll be back by 6. Leo, my quiet little man, didn't say a word. He just shuffled in, his school backpack looking bigger than he was, and wrapped his arms around my legs in a silent hug. That was Leo. He felt the world more than he talked about it. "Nonsense, darling," I said, patting Sarah's arm. "You go on and conquer the world. Leo and I will have a grand adventure right here." As Sarah rushed out, the door clicking shut behind her, I looked down at Leo. He hadn't let go. His big brown eyes were fixed on my favorite thing hanging by the door, my brilliant pillar-box red wool coat. I'd had that coat for 15 years. It had seen me through winters, Christmases, and the day Leo was born. It was more than a coat. It was a piece of my history. "Right then, my love," I said, clapping my hands gently. "Let's get sorted. The park is calling our name. Those ducks won't feed themselves." I walked towards the coat rack, but a small firm hand tugged at my cardigan. I looked down. Leo was shaking his head, his face pale. "What is it, sweetheart? Do you need the loo?" He shook his head again, more vigorously. His eyes darted from me to the coat and back again, wide with a fear that seemed too old for his young face. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice so low I had to bend down to hear him. "Please, don't wear your red coat today." A little shiver like a spider running down my spine tickled my back. It was such an odd, specific thing to say. "Why ever not, Leo? It's my best coat for a chilly day like this." He bit his lip, his little hands twisting together. "It's too bright," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. The man in my dream doesn't like red." "A dream? Well, that explained it. Children and their vivid imaginations." I chuckled, ruffling his hair. "Oh, my dear boy. It was just a silly dream. Look at it." I took the coat off the hanger, holding its vibrant fabric against me. "It's so cheerful. It will scare away any of those dream glooms." But when I turned to smile at him, my smile faltered. A single fat tear was tracing a path down his cheek. He wasn't having a tantrum. He was genuinely, deeply frightened. "Please, Grandma," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "The man with the silver tooth said. He said if he saw the lady in the red coat, he would know it was you. And then he'd take you away." The spider on my spine turned to ice. A man with a silver tooth? That was a detail far too precise for a simple nightmare. The cheerful kitchen suddenly felt a few degrees colder. The red coat in my hands, which moments before felt like a dear friend, now felt heavy, almost accusing. I looked at my grandson's terrified, earnest face and then at the coat. A war raged inside me. The logical part, the Auntie May who paid her bills and grew her own tomatoes, said it was nonsense. But the grandmother's heart, the part that knew Leo's soul, was listening. With a sigh that seemed to come from my very bones, I hung the red coat back on the hook. It settled there, a splash of defiant color in the dim hallway, looking almost disappointed in me. "All right, Leo," I said softly, pulling my old, beige trench coat from the back of the rack. It was drab and boring, but it was safe. "We'll go with this old thing today. Just for you." The relief that washed over his small face was a tidal wave. He threw his arms around my neck, squeezing tightly. As we stepped out into the crisp autumn air, I tried to shake off the unease. But I couldn't. The question echoed in my mind with every step we took. Who was the man with the silver tooth, and why was he looking for a lady in a red coat? The park was its usual, peaceful self. A low mist clung to the grass, and the golden leaves of the oak trees shimmered in the hazy sunlight. It was the kind of scene I loved, the kind that usually filled my heart with a quiet joy. But today the peace felt fragile, like a thin sheet of ice over dark water. Leo, usually racing ahead to the duck pond, stayed glued to my side, his small hand clutching mine like a lifeline. He kept scanning the park, his eyes wide and watchful. "See, my love," I said, my voice sounding a bit too bright, even to my own ears. "Everything is just as it should be. Just a normal lovely day." He didn't answer. His grip tightened. We reached our usual bench, the one with a clear view of the pond where the mallards paddled in grumpy circles. I sat down, pulling Leo up beside me. I started breaking up the crust of the bread I'd brought, the simple, familiar action helping to steady my nerves. "Here, Leo," I said, handing him a piece. "You throw the first bit." He took the bread, but his arm stayed by his side. He was staring across the pond, his body rigid. I followed his gaze. On the far side, near the old bandstand, a man was standing perfectly still. He was too far away to see clearly, just a tall, dark silhouette against the gray stone. There was nothing inherently strange about a man in a park, but there was an intensity to his stillness that felt wrong. He wasn't walking a dog, or reading a paper or talking on the phone. He was just watching. "Leo," I said gently, "what is it?" "It's him," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The man from my dream." My heart gave a single hard thump against my ribs. "Now, Leo, that's impossible. There are lots of men in the world. It can't be the same one." But even as I said it, the man began to move. Not a stroll, but a purposeful, direct walk. He was circling the pond, coming towards our side. Towards us. With every step he took, the details became clearer. A long dark gray overcoat. A hat pulled low over his brow. And as he drew closer, I saw his face was sharp and angular, his skin pale. He was looking directly at our bench. A cold dread, colder than the autumn air, began to seep into my bones. Leo pressed himself against my side, a small, terrified whimper escaping his lips. I put my arm around him, pulling him close, my own heart now hammering a frantic rhythm. The man was about 50 feet away when he stopped. His eyes, dark and unreadable from this distance, swept over us. They lingered for a moment on my face, then on Leo, and then, most strangely of all, they dropped to my coat. My boring beige drab trench coat. A flicker of what looked like confusion, or perhaps disappointment, crossed his sharp features. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, his gaze making my skin crawl. Then his lips moved. It wasn't a smile. It was a thin, tight line of frustration. He turned his head slowly, his eyes scanning the other parkgoers, a mother pushing a pram, a jogger huffing past, an old man reading a newspaper. He seemed to be looking for someone else. Someone specific. And then I saw it. As he turned his head back for one last look at us, the weak sun caught the inside of his mouth. A glint of metal. A flash of silver on one of his canine teeth. The world seemed to tilt. Leo's breath hitched. He had seen it too. The man with the silver tooth was real. Without another glance, the man turned on his heel and walked briskly away, his long coat flapping behind him, quickly disappearing behind a cluster of birch trees. Leo and I sat in stunned silence. The bread for the ducks was a soggy mess in my clenched fist. The cheerful quacks from the pond sounded like mocking laughter. My beige coat, my savior, now felt like a coward's disguise. He had been looking for the red coat. He had been looking for me. And my grandson's dream had just saved me from a meeting I couldn't even begin to understand. The walk home from the park was nothing like the walk there. The world had lost its color, its safety. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made me jump. Leo didn't say a word. He just held my hand, his small fingers icy cold. We were two survivors scuttling through a suddenly hostile land. Once inside, I locked the door, bolted it, and slid the chain across with a definitive clink. I leaned against the solid wood, breathing heavily, as if we'd just outrun a storm. "Right," I said, trying to sound like the capable grandmother I was supposed to be. "Hot chocolate. With extra marshmallows. And then, young man, you and I are going to have a little talk." While the milk warmed on the stove, I sat Leo down at the kitchen table. His little face was still pale, his eyes haunted. "Leo," I began, keeping my voice soft and steady. "This is very, very important. This man, the one with the silver tooth. What else did you see in your dream?" He looked down at the checked tablecloth, tracing a pattern with his finger. He was standing by a big black car. He was talking to another man. He said, "She always wears the red coat. It's how we'll know her." Find the woman in the red coat and you find the key. The key. The word landed in the quiet kitchen with the weight of an anvil. My breath caught in my throat. The milk on the stove began to simmer, a low, anxious sound. A key. I prompted gently. What kind of key, sweetheart? Leo shrugged, his small shoulders slumping. I don't know. Just a key. Then he smiled and I saw the silver tooth and I got scared and woke up. I poured the hot chocolate into 2 mugs, my hands trembling so much I slopped some on the counter. A key. It meant nothing to me. I lived a simple life. My keys were for my house, my shed, and a safety deposit box at the bank where I kept my mother's pearls and my late husband's war medals. Nothing of great value to anyone but me. But the dream had been real. The man was real. So the key had to be real too. After Leo was settled, distracted by his sugary drink and a cartoon on the telly, I went upstairs to my bedroom. In the back of my wardrobe under a stack of old winter jumpers, was a small wooden chest. My memory box. It held the fragments of my life before I was Auntie May, before I was a mother and a grandmother. It held the ghost of the young woman I used to be. I carried it down to the kitchen, the smell of cedar and old paper filling the air. I opened the lid. There, nestled among faded dance cards, pressed flowers, and love letters from my late husband, Arthur, was a small tarnished silver key. It was on a simple ring all by itself. I hadn't looked at it in 20 years. I'd never known what it was for. Arthur had given it to me not long before he passed, his hands weak from the illness. For you, my May, he'd whispered, pressing it into my palm. A little piece of my past. Keep it safe. I'd been so consumed by grief then that I'd simply put it away and forgotten about it. Picked it up. It was cold and surprisingly heavy for its size. As I held it, my eyes fell on a photograph tucked beside the key. It was a picture of Arthur and me, taken on our honeymoon in Brighton, over 40 years ago. We were laughing, young and so desperately in love. I was wearing a stylish swinging 60s dress, and Arthur had his arm wrapped tightly around me. And there, blowing in the sea breeze behind us, caught perfectly by the camera, was a man. He was slightly out of focus, but his face was turned towards us. He was younger, his hair darker, but the sharp, angular features were unmistakable. And he was smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A smile that showed a distinct glint of silver on one of his teeth. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. This wasn't a random threat. This was rooted in my past. In Arthur's past. The man with the silver tooth hadn't just appeared in my grandson's dream. He had been a shadow in my own life decades ago. And now he was back. He was looking for the woman in the red coat. And he was looking for a key that my dear, departed husband had entrusted to me. The photograph felt like a live wire in my hand. The cheerful, laughing faces of our youth were now a backdrop to a lurking menace. I had shared my life with Arthur for 35 wonderful years. He was a mechanic, an honest man with grease under his fingernails and a joke always on his lips. Or so I thought. Staring at the silver-toothed man in our honeymoon photo, a man I had never noticed before, I felt the foundations of my memories crack and shift. What secrets had my gentle Arthur been keeping? I spent the rest of the day in a haze, jumping at every noise, my mind racing down paths I never knew existed. I called my friend Margaret and asked if Leo could have a surprise sleepover. He needed to be far away from me, from my house, from whatever this was. When Sarah came to pick him up, I painted on a bright smile, chattering about our lovely day at the park, omitting the man, the terror, and the key burning a hole in my pocket. I felt a pang of guilt at the lie, but a mother's protection is a fierce and cunning thing. That night, the house was deafeningly silent. I sat at the kitchen table with Arthur's memory box, the tarnished key, and the photograph. I went through every piece of paper, every card, every memento. Tucked into the lining of the box I found it. A small folded square of paper brittle with age. It was a receipt from a pawnbroker's shop in London, dated 1978. The name of the shop was Fleming & Sons Jewelers and Valuers, with an address on Hatton Garden. Scribbled in Arthur's handwriting in the margin were 2 words. Safety deposit. My breath hitched. 1978. That was the year Arthur had come into a small, unexpected sum of money. He'd told me he'd won it on a long-shot bet at the races. We'd used it to fix the roof. I'd never questioned it. He'd been so proud to have provided that for us. Now a new terrifying picture was forming. Arthur hadn't won that money. He'd pawned something. Something valuable enough to require a safety deposit box receipt and a key. And the man with the silver tooth, who had been following us even then, was connected to it. The next morning after a sleepless night, I knew what I had to do. I dressed in my most anonymous clothes, left my red coat hanging forlornly in the hall, and took the first train to London. The journey was a blur of anxiety. Every person on the train seemed suspicious. Every glance felt like a threat. Hatton Garden was a world away from my quiet suburban street. It was a canyon of imposing buildings, their windows filled with dazzling cold jewels. I found the address, a narrow soot-stained building tucked between two grander establishments. Fleming and Sons was written in faded gold lettering on the window. A bell tinkled as I pushed the heavy door open. The inside was dim and smelled of old wood and polish. A wizened old man with a large magnifying glass screwed into his eye looked up from behind a counter. "Can I help you, madam?" he asked, his voice raspy. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I slid the key and the crumpled receipt across the counter. I believe this is for a box here. It was my husband's. He's passed away." The man took the key, held it up to the light, and then looked at the receipt. He peered at me over his spectacles, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Arthur Miller's box," he stated. "We wondered if anyone would ever come. It's been paid in advance for 50 years. He stood up with a sigh. "This way." He led me through a velvet curtain into a vault room lined with small brass-fronted boxes. He inserted a master key into one, and I inserted Arthur's key into the other. With a smooth, heavy click, the door swung open. Inside was a single long velvet case. My hands were shaking as I lifted it out. I laid it on the small wooden table in the center of the room and, with a trembling breath, opened it. I gasped, stumbling back a step. Nestled in the deep blue velvet was a necklace, but it was like no necklace I had ever seen. It was a cascade of diamonds, impossibly bright even in the dim light, centered around a stone the size of my thumbnail, a deep, bloody crimson. A ruby. It was magnificent, terrifying, and worth what I could only imagine was a king's ransom. Tucked into the lid of the case was a folded note. I recognized Arthur's handwriting instantly. "My dearest May, if you are reading this, then my past has finally found you. For that I am so sorry. The man with the silver tooth, his name is Silas Vane. We worked a job together long before I met you. A foolish, desperate mistake. We stole this. I was supposed to be the getaway driver. But when I saw what it was, I knew I couldn't be a part of it. I took it and I ran. I ran to you. I built a new life, a good life with you. This necklace is the Crimson Tear. Stolen from the Volkov family. They are dangerous people, May. Silas has been looking for it, and for me ever since. He knows my face. And he knows I have a wife. I am so sorry to lay this burden on you. Sell it. Hide it. Do whatever you must to be safe. All my love always. Your Arthur." I sank into the chair, the note fluttering from my numb fingers. The pieces slammed together with the force of a physical blow. The mechanic. The long shot bet. The roof over our heads. It was all built on this. On a stolen jewel, on a lie, on a man running from a monster. And the red coat. Silas Vane knew Arthur had a wife. He must have known from watching us all those years ago that I loved the color red. The lady in the red coat. I wasn't just a random target. I was the key to finding Arthur's treasure. The world tilted on its axis. My Arthur, my steady, kind Arthur, had been a thief. The man who fixed our neighbors' cars for free, who cried at his daughter's wedding, had once been part of a robbery. He'd done it for us, I knew. He'd wanted to give me a better life. But he'd also carried this secret, this danger every single day of our marriage. And now he had passed it on to me. The Crimson Tear. The name itself sounded like a tragedy. I stared at the necklace, its bloody red heart seeming to pulse in the dim vault light. It wasn't beautiful to me anymore. It was a curse. It was the source of the fear in my grandson's eyes, the reason a predator was stalking my family. The old pawnbroker was waiting outside the curtain. "Everything all right in there, madam?" he called, his voice laced with a knowing concern. People didn't leave things in safety deposit boxes for 50 years without a story. I snapped the case shut. The click echoed in the small room. "Fine," I said, my voice surprisingly firm. "Thank you for your help." I walked out of Fleming & Sons, the velvet case feeling like a lead weight in my handbag. The busy London street swarmed around me, but I felt utterly alone, encased in a bubble of cold, hard truth. What was I to do? Sell it? How does one sell a legendary stolen jewel? I'd be arrested, or worse, Silas Vane would find me. Hide it? Then he would never stop looking. He had waited 40 years. He would wait 40 more. I found myself walking, not towards the train station, but without any conscious direction, my mind racing. I passed a newsagent, and a headline on a folded newspaper in a rack caught my eye. Volkov family heir lauds philanthropy efforts. Below it was a picture of an elegant, older woman at a charity gala. An idea wild and terrifying began to form in my mind. The most dangerous option, but perhaps the only one that could truly end this. I went home, my body moving on autopilot. I didn't sleep. I spent the night researching on the computer Leo had taught me to use, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard. I found an address. An embassy. The next day I put on my best dress, the one I wore for funerals and weddings. I did not wear my red coat. I placed the velvet case into a sturdy jiffy bag, and I wrote a letter. To the Volkov family. This belongs to you. It was taken a long time ago by a foolish man who spent his life in regret. He is gone now. I am his widow. I am returning it, no conditions, no ransom. I only ask that you let this matter rest. My family knows nothing. We just want to live in peace. I didn't sign it. I posted it from a mailbox in the next town over. Then I waited. The days stretched into a week. Every ring of the phone, every knock at the door, sent my heart into my throat. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see Silas Vane's grim face. The fear was a constant, cold companion. One afternoon, a week later, I was deadheading the roses in my front garden when a long, silent black car pulled up to the curb. My blood ran cold. The door opened and a tall, severe-looking man in an impeccably tailored suit got out. This was it. I gripped my gardening trowel, a pathetic weapon against whatever was to come. But the man didn't approach me. He walked to the passenger side and opened the door. An elderly woman emerged, her back straight as a rod, her silver hair coiffed perfectly. She wore a simple but exquisitely cut black dress. It was the woman from the newspaper photo. She walked slowly towards my gate. Her eyes, a piercing pale blue, scanned my face, my house, my simple garden. They held no warmth, but also, to my surprise, no overt hostility. They were the eyes of someone who assessed value and risk. She stopped at the gate, not entering my property. She didn't smile. "The matter is closed," she said, her voice accented, crisp and clear as ice. "The item has been returned to its rightful place. Your husband's debt is paid." Her gaze flickered over me one last time, a final dismissive assessment. "You will not be bothered again." Without another word, she turned and walked back to the car. The severe man opened the door for her, and they drove away, the car purring off down the street as silently as it had arrived. I stood there, my trowel hanging loosely from my hand, the scent of my roses suddenly overwhelming. The matter was closed. It was over. A few days later, a small, brief news item appeared in the financial section of the paper. It reported that a notorious freelance acquisitions specialist, known to Interpol, a man named Silas Vane, had been found dead in his London flat. The cause was listed as natural causes. I knew better. The Volkovs had tidied up. They had kept their word. That evening Leo was over for dinner. He was back to his old self, chattering about school and his friends, the nightmare seemingly forgotten. As he helped me clear the table, he looked up at me, his eyes clear and bright. "You're wearing your red cardigan, Grandma," he said, smiling. I looked down at the soft crimson wool. I had put it on without even thinking. I smiled back, a real deep genuine smile for the first time in weeks. The color red was mine again. It was no longer a target. It was just my favorite color. "Yes, my love," I said, pulling him into a warm, safe hug. "I am." The shadow was gone. The secret was buried. And my family, my precious ordinary family, was safe. All thanks to a little boy's dream, a husband's long-held regret, and a grandmother's love that proved stronger than any curse.